Hi, my name is Evan Brenner, and I'm the Digital Content Coordinator here at Geographic Solutions. Over the past 7 months, our Pathways to Employment webinar series has showcased the outstanding work that our clients perform on a daily basis. In December, team members from Tulare County discussed how they're lowering recidivism with the TC Reset portal. In February, we heard from NC Works about how they virtualized service delivery at the height of the pandemic. In March, we heard from our clients at the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions about how the Career Solutions portal became a leading statewide online career planning platform. In April, Bounce CEO and founder Maria Smith joined us to speak about using soft skills to bounce back after major challenges, coping with stress in positive ways, and building resilience in others. May's event showed us how the Connecticut Department of Labor is paving the way for reemployment with the Jobs First Employment Services Program. Today, we're pleased to present the next chapter in our Pathways to Employment series. The Colorado Department of Labor and Employment is a long-standing client of Geographic Solutions, and the Colorado Labor Market Information Gateway, or COLMI Gateway, is playing an important role in the state's economic recovery. A little bit of housekeeping. Please submit questions in the question window. The question window is found at the top right of the Teams Live toolbar. We will discuss all questions submitted at the end of the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce Monicque Aragon, economist at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment.
All right, thanks again, Evan, for that introduction. My name is Monicque Aragon. I'm an economist with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Today, I'm going to be talking about how Colorado uses labor market information to survey the road to economic recovery. More specifically, we'll be discussing how the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment used Gateway to disseminate information during the height of the pandemic, how there was a huge increase in the demand for economic data, and how we kind of had to find a little bit more timely data to use. And we'll also talk about how CDLE and you can use Gateway to analyze the economic recovery in Colorado. At the beginning of the pandemic in May 2020, we revamped our press release and added a bunch of supplemental information to it to give a broader picture of the labor market situation in Colorado. So before I get into any data, I just kind of want to talk about what labor market information is. We work contractually with the Bureau of Labor Statistics to produce official estimates for Colorado and sub-state areas. Some of the things we measure include non-farm payroll jobs, labor force, total employment, the number of unemployed, the unemployment rate, occupation wages and employment, and industry wages and employment. These data are comparable across every geographic area in the US and across time. They feed into the national BLS estimates. And I have here that they're the most timely economic indicator for labor market conditions in Colorado. But as you'll see in the next few slides, we kind of pivoted to using even more timely data with some caveats to it. So in early January, February 2020, Colorado was experiencing historically low unemployment rates. By early March, we had our first confirmed COVID-19 case in the state. And by mid-March, we had our first shutdown orders and stay-at-home orders from the governor. In April 2020, we went from having the historically low rates to a historically high rate of 12.1%. We lost nearly 350,000 jobs. And overall, typically Colorado tends to trend below the US in terms of the unemployment rate. However, during this recovery for the last few months, we have been slightly above the US rate. And the last time that this happened was during the last recovery in April of 2012, when we were recovering from the Great Recession. So as I stated previously, when the pandemic hit, there was just a lot of uncertainty. Everybody, our stakeholders, us, everybody wanted to know what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next week. The labor market was so volatile that everybody was just kind of looking for the next piece of information that they could get into some insight into what's going on in the labor market. So this chart shows the number of email subscribers that we have on our website, COLMIGateway.com. Prior to the pandemic, we averaged about 18 subscribers per month. And we had this one blip here in January of 2020 because we did a little bit of advertising in a newsletter. And aside from that single month of advertising, we don't do any sort of promotions or advertising. So you can see once the pandemic hit, just how much the demand for economic data exploded. So although we put out our current employment situation every month, during the beginning of the pandemic, even a monthly lag was a little bit too long. Everybody was kind of eager to know like what's going to happen because there was so much uncertainty. So as a department, we sort of started to heavily rely on our unemployment insurance claims data. This data comes out on a weekly basis. Every state is required by the U.S. Department of Labor and Employment to produce continued claims and initial claims weekly to the USDOL. And so as a more timely indicator, we kind of started to look to this data to give some insight into what's coming around the corner. So we dedicated an entire page to our unemployment insurance data in the end of April 2020. And this highlighted area here is where we house all of that data. I don't want to go into a tutorial of how to use our website, but throughout the presentation, I will kind of point you to some things. So in case you are ever looking for data for Colorado, you know where to find it. So if you go to this link here that I've highlighted called Unemployment Insurance Statistics for Colorado, it'll take you to this page here. This first link at the top that says new, these are weekly unemployment insurance charts that we still produce every single week. So you can always find the data up through the last Saturday. I think we'll be releasing the next set of charts this Thursday. But during the pandemic, we were able to use another system that had a little bit different definitions for unemployment insurance, so they weren't directly comparable to the US DOL numbers. But using that system, we were able to break out these unemployment insurance claims by a bunch of characteristics like demographics such as race, age, gender, ethnicity, industry, and occupation. So this first chart here is pulled directly from that first link of the weekly unemployment insurance initial claims that we provide. And during 2019, the average amount of weekly claims that we would receive was a little under 2,000 per week. At the start of the pandemic, we received in a single week over 100,000 initial claims. This is 50 times what we had expected in 2019. And just to give you a little bit more point of reference, during the Great Recession, the highest amount of initial claims in a single week we received was a little under 8,000. So I don't like to compare this recession to the Great Recession in too many ways, because I do think that they are vastly different and we need to think about them in different ways. But just to sort of give a difference in magnitude, I think it can be helpful. So across all the unemployment insurance programs, regular UI, there's pandemic unemployment assistance, federal pandemic unemployment compensation, pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, state extended benefits, and lost wages assistance. Of the total programs since March 2020, we've paid over $10 billion in benefits. So during the height of the pandemic, this was one of the charts that we were able to provide. Well, we provided the data. And so basically every chart moving forward in this presentation is either created by just directly pulling data from Gateway and producing a chart, or it'll be a chart that comes directly from our press release. So this is a chart I created just by pulling some data out of Gateway, and it shows the share of initial claims by sex from January 2019 to December 2020. Typically, in general, men will file more initial claims proportionally than women do, and this is just due to the type of industries that they tend to work in. So manufacturing, construction, mining and logging, these types of industries tend to have a higher proportion of male employment. They tend to be more seasonal in nature, and they also are more vulnerable to economic recession. So not only during economic expansions do we typically see men filing more unemployment insurance claims, but also it's sort of exacerbated during a recession. However, during the pandemic, we saw very early on that this was different. Women were being much more heavily impacted. And you can see right when the pandemic hit, this dip here in April 2020, where women's share becomes larger in the amount of claims. And then again in December of 2020, when we sort of had that second wave in COVID cases. And this is partly due to the type of industries that women work in. So industries that were more impacted by the shutdown orders, healthcare, restaurants, education. Also, there's that childcare mechanism that comes into play as well. Similarly, we saw early on that younger individuals were being impacted by the pandemic. So this chart looks at the percent of initial claims filed in 2020 by age group, and then that age group's percent of the 2019 labor force. So individuals aged 20 to 34 made up about over 40% of the total initial claims filed in 2020. However, they only made up 35% of the labor force. And again, this plays into the types of industries that were being most impacted, which we see here. So this chart shows the share of initial claims filed by each industry. So accommodation and food services made up over 21% of the total initial claims filed from March 15th to December 19th in 2020. This is followed by, and think of that, bars and restaurants, and this is followed by healthcare and social assistance, retail trade, and administrative and waste services. These top four accounted for over 50% of all initial claims filed. So we can really see how it was a very industry specific recession. So as you may have noticed in the last few charts that I've presented, a lot of those charts ended in December 2020. And that is due to a number of reasons. We decided to discontinue those series because there was a lot of volatility and validity issues with it. Primarily, the main reason we decided to discontinue it was due to just the rampant fraud that was going throughout the unemployment insurance system across the United States. And at the same time, we also went through a UI modernization transition. So we didn't feel the data had enough validity or could give enough economic insight to continue using those series. So we've gone back to our traditional data series, such as the current employment statistics and the local area unemployment statistics, to give a good picture of the labor market situation in Colorado. And again, revamping our press release to include just a lot more information. Our press release used to be about 2 pages of narrative, and the last one that we just released for June was 32 pages of supplemental tables and charts, just to give you a really in-depth picture of what's going on in the labor market. So going back to our website, if you do want to find our monthly press release and our monthly press release schedule, you can find our monthly press release here in this current employment situation link. It'll always have the latest one there. Above it is just the most recent unemployment rate for Colorado as well as the United States. And then if you want to see our schedule for press releases, you can click on this employment situation press release schedule. And if you want to pull some data yourself, you're going to go to this menu option up here. When you go to this menu option, it'll pull down this menu here, and you'll go to employment and wage data. And this will give you all of the data programs that we house on our website, COLMIGateway.com. This is our release, our employment situation press release schedule. So it gives not only the national jobs report when that data is released, but also the Colorado employment numbers. So aside from jobs and unemployment rate, there are a lot of ways to measure what's going on in Colorado's labor market. One that we really like to focus on is the employment to population ratio. And so basically, this is the share of Coloradans who are 16 and older and are employed in a given month. Well, we are seeing some recovery. It has slowed in the last few months. It's been pretty much flat over the last few months, and we're still about 2.5 percentage points below where we were in February 2020 prior to the pandemic. In April 2020, you can see we hit a historically low share of 57%. Colorado's labor force participation rate has shown very strong recovery in this economic recovery. So what the labor force participation rate is it's the share of Coloradans 16 and older who are in the labor force. Now, to be in the labor force, you have to be either employed or unemployed. To be employed, you had to have worked during a reference week in the month. So typically this is the week that includes the 12th of the month. And to be unemployed, you have to be available, able, and seeking work. So those two components make up the labor force, and then that total out of the population makes up the labor force participation rate. So we've seen some very strong recovery. In June, we ranked 3rd for the highest labor force participation rate. And we're only about 0.2 of a percentage point where we were prior to the pandemic. So unfortunately, we don't have monthly estimates for labor force statistics at a demographic type of level, but we do have them on a 12-month moving average. This comes from the CPS. And so basically this number here in 2019 represents the 2019 annual average, is just under 63%. During the pandemic, we saw a similar drop in the female labor force participation rate. However, in the most recent months, we are seeing some evidence of strong recovery, but because of the nature of this data and the 12-month moving average, I don't think there's too much we can read into it just yet, but we are seeing some positive signs there. This chart here shows kind of a hypothetical situation. So this blue line where it says pre-COVID trend plus 4,900 a month. In 2019, we added on average about 4,900 jobs per month. If the pandemic had never hit and we would continued on that trend, that blue line is what our jobs trend would have looked like. The gray dotted line is basically where it's just fixed at that February 2020 level right before the pandemic hit. And this black line is the actual number. So as you can see, the huge loss, we lost over about 350,000 jobs in between February and April of 2020. And you can see the recovery as we've come back up. So basically what this chart estimates is over the last 6 months, we've added about 15,500 jobs per month. If we continue to add that amount of jobs on average, it'll take us about 6.5 months to get to that gray line, that February pre-pandemic level, and it'll take us about 11.5 months to get to that blue line, the trend, if the pandemic had never happened. So just breaking out a little bit by area, this chart shows the blue line is the amount of jobs that were lost between February and April of 2020. The orange line is the amount of jobs that we've gained back since then, up through June 2021. And you can see that recovery rate down here at the bottom. So as a whole, Colorado has recovered about 74% of the jobs that were lost in February and April of 2020. And this outpaces the US that has only recovered about 70%. Breaking out by area, we can see our non-metro area has recovered the most jobs. However, it's kind of hard to get a lot of information from this because it's basically a residual of the state. So it's including not only like our mountain resort areas in the west, but also our eastern plains and agriculture on the east side. And so it's a weird industry mix. The primary driver of that recovery, though, is how well our ski resorts areas have recovered. And this is then followed by Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Denver, Grand Junction, Pueblo, and Boulder and Greeley are trailing a little bit behind. Boulder due to some impacts to the education sector that we are still seeing, and Greeley due to the heavy oil and gas concentration in that area. So this chart shows the contribution to the total jobs lost by industry sector between lost in March and April 2020 by industry sector. So of the 350,000 jobs that were lost, accommodation and food services, so bars and restaurants, accounted for 36% of those jobs lost. And the top four on this list, retail, trade, private healthcare and social assistance, and arts, entertainment, and recreation, along with bars and restaurants, accounted for over 66% of the total jobs that were lost. However, these jobs have also contributed to the most job gains over the last several months. So since April 2020, the same top four, accommodation and food services, retail, trade, private healthcare, arts, entertainment, and recreation, have accounted for over 75% of the total jobs recovered. We also broke the recovery out by industries that we have identified as low, medium, and high wage industries. So high wage industries are going to be mining and logging, professional and technical services, management companies. Just to give some examples, medium would be construction, manufacturing, transportation, and warehousing. And the low wage industries are going to be those accommodation and food services, education, retail, trade, and so on. And you can see that just the low wage industries just massively impacted by the pandemic, this huge drop in jobs here in April in 2020. And then in terms of recovery, still well below. So high wage industries have recovered 99% of the jobs that were lost. Medium wage industries have recovered 97% of the jobs that were lost, and low wage industries have only recovered about 93% of the jobs that were lost. And you can see just compared to the US too, it's similar trends for both the state and for the nation. So if we look at what industries have recovered the fastest, again, the blue lines show the jobs that were lost, the orange lines show the jobs that were recovered. So the first 5 industries on this chart, transportation, management of companies, professional, scientific, and technical, wholesale trade, and retail trade, have recovered over 100% of the jobs that were lost. And I do want to emphasize that with retail, it's kind of a split story here. So certain, retail sectors did very good, and some may not ever return. But the primary concentration of jobs recovered have been in establishments like grocery stores, home improvement stores, outdoor gear stores, just driving a lot of that demand for labor. These industries on this chart are sort of what we consider medium in recovery. So they've recovered between 62 and 80% of the jobs that were lost. So we have real estate, arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodation and food services, other services. That includes, I think, like salons and tattoo parlors. And then we have admin and support services. That includes a lot of temp help. And these industries here are industries where we're still seeing some very low recovery or continued loss. So the first 3 on this chart, education, manufacturing, construction, they do have positive recovery, but they're recovering much slower than the other industries, between 37 and 60%. And then the industries on the right, finance and insurance, information, mining and logging, and government, are still showing job losses through June 2021. And the weird thing about information is when you think of information, you think, at least me, I would think of broadcasting, publishing, those type of establishments, but movie theaters is also included in that, and they were hit very hard by the pandemic. So just to give a summary of everything I've talked about today, during the height of the pandemic, the unemployment insurance claims data was used as an economic indicator, just because there was such high demand for more timely data. However, there are a lot of reliability and volatility issues with this data. So we really recommend using our more reliable economic indicators, such as the current employment statistics and the local area unemployment statistics series, while you're analyzing the economic recovery in Colorado. Again, we revamped our press release to give a broader picture of economic recovery in Colorado. And LMI Gateway is where we house all of this data, where anyone can go extract the data, look at our press releases, and sign up for email notifications. So if you just go to our webpage, colmigateway.com, right on the front, it'll say sign up for email notifications, and you can enter your email there. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions that we may have. Also, if anybody wants to email me, my contact information is there. Feel free to shoot me an email as well.
Monique, thank you so much. That was excellent. And we have a few questions that I'll ask on your behalf and or on the asker's behalf. And one question is from Adam Greeny. They ask, how are potentially fraudulent claims accounted for in the UI claims chart that you shared?
So there are a number of ways. That's one thing that we have been working on. I mean, every state has been, trying to find ways to account for the fraud. We have several. I can't remember the number. It's some vastly amount of number for identity checks, just to make sure that we are accounting for that fraud. And Unfortunately, I don't have any fraud estimates on me, but that's something that I can look into and get back to if that person wants to email me. But yeah, so the data that I provided was sort of pre-fraud being a significant problem within the system. And so once we realized that, you know, we had this massive amount of fraud coming in the data, that's when we terminated the series.
Excellent. And also, Adam also asks, is Colorado's LMI shop part of the UI division?
So we're part of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. The UI division is separate. So they're their own division. We're under the Division of Labor Standards and Statistics. So while we work under the same department, we are in different divisions. So yeah, you know, the UI division are the ones that take the claims and work with the claimants, and I just get to play with the data.
That's awesome. And Monique, going back to the subscription list, tell me or speak a little bit more about how you came up with the idea, or how your team came up with the idea for the subscription list, and what kind of tech you were using to, or that you used to get the subscribers.
Yes, so aside from we put one ad in our newsletter in January 2020, just sort of promoting the website and signing up for data. But aside from that, we really haven't promoted it very much. During the pandemic, it was just a very natural increase, very natural gravitation to our website of people wanting this data to like find out what's going on in Colorado during the pandemic.
And to follow that up, and I forgot if this was covered at the beginning, but do you have interest from this subscription list from the general public, or is it mainly agencies, employers, et cetera?
It's a wide range. So we have academics, a lot of workforce development professionals, a lot of just general public who is interested. So yeah, it really, really varies.
And how many agencies would you say have reached out since the beginning of the pandemic, and how many employers, as far as subscriptions?
You know, I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I can definitely. I'd have to see, because I think the data that I have is just a list of subscribers, and I don't know when they necessarily subscribed. But I could see if I could find out kind of if the demand was more driven by public organizations or private organizations, and yeah.
Very cool, very cool. And what are you seeing as the top 5 industries leading the economic recovery in Colorado?
That's a good question. I mean, professional scientific and technical services is always a strong driver for growth for our state. I expect them to continue a lot of the growth. Also, yeah, maybe, yeah. Yeah, again, we've seen really strong recovery in accommodation and food services. Whether that will continue will depend on a lot of things, but unfortunately, we just don't really have that breakout at this time.
Excellent. And I mean, some other things I was definitely, blown away by is just the 100,000 initial claims. That's a huge number, and so that's just so interesting to hear about. And definitely leisure and hospitality is something that I guess we're seeing a lot of. And the other thing is, 20 to 25 to 34 range. That was definitely very interesting as well. What, if you could, just touch on, are there any initiatives that are helping with the economic recovery in Colorado that the CDLE is involved in?
So I don't work too much on the policy side of things. I pretty much just get to analyze and produce the data. We do have, I know we do have a lot of job assistance programs. I mean, we have our own workforce development center. You can go to even our website, COLMIGateway.com, has job search options. So you can look for jobs and filter by areas and industries, whatever you're looking for. And yeah, I know the workforce development has a lot of policies in place, but unfortunately, I don't think I'm the person to speak to that.
That's okay. That's okay. And another question I would say for other economists and industry folks who are on the call today, do you have any advice or tips for how they can, analyze the economic recovery in their states?
Yeah, I mean, I think every state has labor market information, division, at least some form of it. And so this data should be at least every state should have the current employment statistics and the local area unemployment statistics. So those are kind of the two that most people talk about, the jobs and the unemployment rate. Yeah, every state should have some similar form of economic data that they can disseminate.
Excellent. Thank you, Monique.
Also, the BLS
yes.
website is great. If you want to look for all states, just go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and you can pull any state if you're interested in anybody other than your own state as well.
Monique, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today, and I don't see too many other questions in the question window. If anybody that's attending right now has a question, there is a little button at the top right-hand corner. It says Q&A, and if you have a question and you want to submit it right now, you can, and we can discuss it, or send them after the presentation, and I can coordinate with Monique to answer them, or you can contact Monique at the contact information she put out there. So I think, and at this point, I think we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. I am again so grateful, Monique, for you joining us today, and on behalf of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. My name is Evan Brenner. I am the Digital Content Coordinator at Geographic Solutions, and I thank everybody so much for their time today, taking it to join us. This is our Pathways to Employment series, and I hope you will join us for the next one. We will get a recording out of this presentation very shortly, so please look out for that in your email. And with that said, we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon or morning.